One of the most important lessons that the Godfather himself instilled in Don Michael was to keep your friends close, but your enemies closer. But what does that mean, and how can you use it in your own life? Don Vito was actually describing Law 2 of power. It may initially seem the most evil or Machiavellian law in the laws of power, but if you look deeper, you'll find that there is a somewhat hidden principle that people often overlook, a skill that all those who reach the top of their fields have mastered, and by the end, you too will understand and master this strategy, helping you conquer your goals. Transgression of the law. It's 1955, and Michael Corleone was being prepared to become the new Godfather. And when it was time, Michael began his ruthless quest, crushing all those who stood in his way. By the end, he became the undisputed and unchallenged Godfather of the entire criminal underworld. It seemed as though he was now invincible, and so no one was going to dare challenge his or the family's position. And now it was time to finally focus on his own personal ambitions. Or so he thought. Through his conquest of the criminal underworld, he had made enemies, very powerful enemies, enemies who do not forget nor forgive, and who would swear revenge no matter how long it would take. A few years later, in 1958, Michael's trusted and loyal underboss, Peter Clemenza, had died from a supposed heart attack.
No, there was no heart attack.
So Michael needed to find a replacement, and fast. But instead of naming one of his capable capos as his new underboss, Michael decided to take a different approach. He named Fredo as the new underboss, a move that many would question within the Corleone family. Now, the top 3 positions in the organization were occupied by those the Don could absolutely trust, those who were literally part of the Corleone family. But putting Fredo in this powerful position only works because he did the following. He gave the status and power to Fredo, someone he knew that had absolute loyalty to him. But the day-to-day operations were passed down to Frankie Five Angels, one of Clemenza's top men, and was often regarded as the real underboss of the family. The reason behind this move is quite interesting. You see, Michael had learned from experience that betrayal from those high in the family's hierarchy leads to disaster. And so, even though he was lucky that his former underboss didn't betray him, there's no guarantee that his other men won't. Anyone was liable to do the same thing. After all, it wasn't personal, it was just business. He could have abolished the position, but he knew that would send the wrong message. Therefore, he gave this position to Fredo, which seemed to be a safer move. But there was a problem. Since Michael was at the top, all eyes were on him, especially those wished to see him fall, and the time had come for him to answer for his previous transgressions. You see, during Michael's journey of climbing to the top of the Mafia, one of the people who had stood in his way was a man called Mo Green, known as the creator of Las Vegas. Now, Mo Green had made 2 critical mistakes that had sealed his fate, one being worse than the other. The first was refusing an offer from a Corleone Don. The second, and far more consequential, was the fact that he very openly and on multiple occasions disrespected the Corleone family, and there was no going back from that. What Michael overlooked was that Mo Green had many powerful friends who had profited millions from his casinos, and they didn't want to sit back and just accept the fate of their moneymaker, but very few of them could really do anything about it. Standing up to the Godfather himself seemed impossible, and so had no choice but to move on. All except for one man. Hyman Roth was one of the most influential gangsters in the criminal underworld, with a long-established history and reputation in the Mafia. And by now, Roth despised Michael, and his hatred had been festering for years. But following the news about his friend, instead of being rash and reckless, Roth would wait. He held back until the perfect opportunity would arise, and when he saw Fredo be chosen for such an important position, it was finally his time to avenge his fallen friend. Hyman Roth was also an astute master of the game of power, and so he had learned how to masterfully use Law 2 to crush his enemies. To begin this quest for revenge, he would need to wait. However, he was not just sitting idly by waiting for fate to fortune him. Rather, he spent a significant amount of time analyzing Michael. He decided the only way to annihilate the Corleone family was to do it from within. And this is what brings us back to Fredo becoming the Corleone family's underboss. As I'm sure you're aware, Fredo had a well-established reputation of incompetence. But Fredo, he saw himself as someone undervalued, someone whose life was unfair to him, and just needed the right opportunity to prove himself. Roth caught this very early on, and once Michael approached him to acquire a few hotels and casinos in Vegas, as well as the whole Havana deal, he now had an easy path to manipulate Fredo to his will. Fredo played a vital role in the assassination attempt at his home, possibly even thwarted Michael's attempt of finally getting rid of Hyman Roth in Cuba. Roth had hit Michael from where he least expected it, and would bring the Corleone family the closest it's ever been to total annihilation. Interpretation: the Don's mistake. The brilliance of Roth's strategy was the fact that even though he was not more powerful than Michael in terms of manpower, wealth, or even connections and status, he still managed to land a deadly blow that Michael would suffer from for the rest of his life. The reason he was incredibly close to finally annihilating the Corleone family was the fact he understood his enemy and identified his weak point, a simple strategy that had been used for thousands of years. But the truth is, the biggest key to his success had nothing to do with him. Roth did the smart thing, and as we explained, waited for the perfect opportunity to strike and played the game right. However, the real reason Roth's attack was so lethal came down to Michael's transgression of the second law of power. Michael thought that Fredo would be grateful to him. After all, he did take care of him and give him everything he wanted: status, money, and power. But he overlooked viewing things from Fredo's perspective, allowing him to slowly grow more and more resentful. The laws of power state, when you decide to hire a friend, you gradually discover the qualities he or she has kept hidden. Strangely enough, it is your act of kindness that unbalanced everything. People want to feel they deserved their good fortune. The receipt of a favor can become oppressive. It means you have been chosen because you are a friend, not necessarily because you are deserving. There's almost a touch of condescension in the act of hiring friends that severely afflicts them. The injury will come out slowly. A little more honesty, flashes of resentment and envy here and there, and before you know it, your friendship fades. The more favors and gifts you supply to revive the friendship, the less gratitude you receive. As you can probably tell by now, this law perfectly encapsulates Michael's situation, although the way Michael dealt with the situation after that is a different discussion. Judgment. Be wary of friends. They will betray you more quickly, for they are easily aroused to envy. They also become spoiled and tyrannical, but hire a former enemy and he will be more loyal than a friend because he has more to prove. In fact, you have far more to fear from friends than from enemies. If you have no enemies, find a way to make them. Keys to power. In the game of power, you need to surround yourself and acquire the ability to identify those who will best further your interests in all situations. Which essentially means, if you want to succeed in the game of power, or in life in general, you need to surround yourself with those most capable in helping you reach your goals. You probably know and witness firsthand people being put into positions that they are not qualified for, like what we saw with Michael and Fredo Corleone. The game of power is just that, a game. And to win the game, you need the most powerful pieces on the board. If you don't, when the time comes, your opponent will use it against you. This is a fairly common mistake, something that throughout history many have chosen to ignore, and therefore had to suffer the consequences. There are obviously exceptions, and we'll get into them later on. That's one side to it. The core idea of the law is to change your perspective on how you view your so-called enemies and friends. It states that your enemies are an untapped gold mine that you must learn to exploit, and this one idea is the most important thing you need to take away from this video. So, what does this all have to do with you? How does this law even apply to our somewhat ordinary lives? Well, as we mentioned, the key idea you should take away is the idea of learning how to use your enemies. And the context can vary depending on your situation, so you could just change the word enemy to opponent or even competitor. In fact, this is something that those who excel in all competitive fields from throughout history have used to elevate themselves to the heights of success in their fields. Without enemies around us, we grow lazy. An enemy at our heels sharpens our wits, keeping us focused and alert. It is sometimes better then to use enemies as enemies, rather than transforming them into friends or allies. With all that being said, the question is, should you use this law? As we mentioned previously, and this applies to all the laws of power, the key to mastering the game of power is knowing when to use them. Don't just mindlessly try out these laws without thinking your decisions through. You need to be sure of the context of your situation and decide if this law is applicable to you. Will it grow your power or diminish it? Once again, mastering the art of timing is key. But as Machiavellian as this law initially seems, generally the answer is yes. You definitely should start using the principles we outlined. The idea of using your enemies to your advantage, and in the world of business, putting skill and competence above personal relations is all great advice. Definitely something you should be looking into applying to your own life in a positive way. This applies in a number of settings, but specifically in competitive environments. If you want to master the game of power, enhance your own life, and learn from the mistakes of others, you need to be part of the Culture Mafia, because what we've planned out for the upcoming months, let's just say you'll definitely want to be part of.